Welcome back to the channel. Today I am going to be using some of my loops and thread, what I call my play experiment yarn, because it's very affordable.
And I thought I'm going to take some of this raspberry yarn that I've frogged out many times, again, experimenting unsuccessfully with some ideas. So we're going to use this today to see if I can figure out with some information, imagination, a version for me of all the various ideas that I've kind of been experimenting with and things that I've pinned to my inspiration board. So let's see if we're more successful with this experiment than some of the ones that I have frogged out. And again, I'm going to repurpose this yarn from experiments that weren't so successful. But I really did like this camel stitch top. I ended up with the finished version in a far different yarn that had way more drape. So I really love the end result on this t-shirt with a bamboo, very drapey kind of yarn. And that's not the play yarn. So the play yarn that I'm using again is a 4-weight, and I've seen a lot of really beautiful vest ideas that I've been pinning, but most of them are knit patterns. So I've linked a couple because I think they're amazing and I love the ideas, and I've got, probably 12 on my inspiration board. But I wanted to be able to do something a lot faster, just didn't feel like knitting, and I prefer to crochet, but I couldn't really find a complete pattern that was sort of really suited to what I'm looking for or I thought would fit me well. So I'm using again a 4-weight yarn. I did use a 4.5 hook, and again, you can find on Ravelry links to the inspiring vests that I love that are knit projects, but I thought you could just walk through with me today and kind of follow my progress as I experiment with a crochet vest to suit my needs. And like a lot of my projects, when I can't find a pattern, I just end up taking a shirt that I love to kind of start me off. And so I loved the length of this, which was around 26 inches, but I wanted sort of just a simple vest that has an open side. So was trying to figure out again, how much width do I want? And because I don't want the front and back panels kind of flopping around, I was also looking, if I'm creating, ties or different ways of kind of keeping the sides together and not flapping or falling into things as I bend over. I was experimenting with different widths of belts, or again, just trying to figure out the placement of, ideally for me, what are my kind of guesstimates on overall sort of measurements if I'm just doing a really simple, really quick, kind of easy to crochet vest. So that's how I start off, just sort of sketching things out on paper. And again, when I'm using my own shirts, I'm usually a little bit more guaranteed that I'm going to like the end result because it's, something that I'll actually wear and enjoy. So again, I've got my stash yarn. I like the camel stitch, so I'm trying that. Some people also call it the half double crochet using the sidebar. So different terminology, but it's a very quick, easy stitch to do. And I ended up with a gauge that was around 4 stitches per inch when I tested it out. Again, the yarn that I'm using I think is a bit tattered, but it will kind of wash up nicely because it does. And so I've got 16 stitches and 14 rows for the gauge that I kind of tested out with my camel stitch. And that is what's giving the end sort of product a really nice kind of, again, that linear rib kind of effect look. So I thought it was just kind of flattering again when you're creating that front panel. Now, I did start by chaining a lot longer because, again, I tend to like longer shirts, thinking also in the spring and the fall when I'm likely to wear this for the additional warmth. I'd want something a little longer, but when I kind of held them up and again went back to the shirt pattern, it did seem a little long. So I ended up surprising myself and chaining a lot less, even though I wasn't sure about, again, how it would fit with a bust or a hip line or how it would drape. So again, one of the reasons why I love doing the experiments with some play yarn and kind of working out all of the details to see really what do I like as the finished product, what am I going to wear often. Now, as I worked through the camel stitch, again, I ended up wanting about 2.5 inches for each of the shoulder pieces from the edge up until the bottom of the neckline. And so again, that was based on measuring my shirt, and I'm working with about 2.5 inches. So I wanted to, again, just have the bottom straight across, but change that. And I actually did one little decrease just to curve up the edge of the bottom to match the blue shirt that I was using as a template. So I did frog it out because I had it straight and just thought maybe that would be not as flattering. But I think both end up being nice at the end when I looked at both in retrospective. And how I worked the shoulder up to the neckline was I just did an increase. So I did 6 increases along that 2.5 increase to give me, again, just a nice gradual shoulder line. And then for the turtleneck, I originally chained 4, thinking maybe a mock turtleneck would be nice, but I ended up chaining 8. So thinking, again with 4, I might actually end up having to wear a scarf with that all the time. And so that wasn't really ideal. And it would be nicer to have a higher neckline that, again, with this yarn would sort of not kind of be too tight or touch my neck. It actually stands out nicely from the neck. So for me, because I didn't want a tight turtleneck, I was using 8 inches, again, as my original measurement. And that meant I ended up with about 13 ribs, if you're sort of just counting the ribs across the front of the front panel. So on the other side, I just decreased the same shoulder 2.5 inches, and that means I ended up with a panel that's about 13 inches wide. Again, I always did the increases or changes on the wrong side, so it didn't have to be perfect. I think if you end up with 14, you're also fine. Now the side piece for me was 22 inches, and to the top of the neckline was 26 inches. So very straightforward, as I kind of made that front panel as my first kind of test panel to figure out the overall measures, and holding it up against you, I thought it would work out. I did also experiment with doing like a really dramatic increase on the back. I love some of the vests that have a short front, long back, but again, when I held this up and started chaining, I didn't think it worked out quite as well. And I ended up basically making a back that was not longer, but just slightly chain, just slightly longer than the front, just to accommodate again for a little bit of give on the back. And so again, just slightly longer, not as long as I originally thought. And when you actually do hem the shoulders and the sides of the necks together, it wasn't even as dramatic as it looked when I had it laying out flat. So very simple to basically make a back panel that is exactly as I did for the front, but just a slight increase in length. And then I tried a lot of side panels. So I started off with a rectangle that was simple to adhere and made a really nice side panel to leave the sides open under the arm. I actually ended up then, though, thinking that wasn't quite flattering and tried a couple of just ties, or there was also lots of really pretty ways of shaping those side panels. The one I am going to test is one that went a little bit longer and turned the side panel into a belt. I thought that was both flattering and also just really practical. So I'll let you how that works out as we test out this piece and see how comfortable and practical it really is. Thanks as always for watching. We appreciate all the subscriptions we have got as we've launched our new channel. And if you do just want to be notified when we upload new videos, you can click the bell below. So let us know what you think about our experiment and any ideas you may have for some wonderful crochet vests that are very practical for when you're outside in the spring and the fall.